guys, my name is Ramota and welcome back to my channel. I am the Global Scientist. So, I'm actually filming a video within like a 2-week margin of my last video, which, if you know me, my friends who know me who are watching this video, this is basically a miracle. So, I'm really feeling the inspiration in quarantine times. You guys will be able to tell from the title of this video, we're going to be talking about the things I wish I knew when I started my PhD. I'm going to be giving my kind of personal experience about what I wish I knew, and then I got some questions from my friend Adama, who is also the catalyst in me on Twitter and on Instagram, who creates great blog content for everyone. So I'm going to put her at here for you guys to follow. And she's a master's student who is thinking about a PhD, and so I thought it would be good for me to ask her some questions that she might have. So let's get started. As you guys know, I am a first year student on an ESRC, BBSRC, which is Social Sciences and Biological Sciences funded PhD. It's a 4-year program. The way my program works is that it's rotational in the first year, which means you do September to December with one supervisor on one topic. From January to March, you do another topic, and then you start to work on your project proposal up until June. You kind of finalize that, and in September, you're officially in your lane doing your research with whatever PhD pieces you've chosen. It's kind of, the idea behind the PhD is to ensure that it's interdisciplinary, and it works across 3 universities, which is UCL, which is where I'm based, Manchester, and Essex University. I picked my PhD mostly because my background, if you guys have watched my last video, which I hope you have, is in biological sciences and tropical disease biology, which means that I am very focused in my research in terms of the fact that I've been primarily based in the lab. It was during my master's, I developed an interest in both public health and epidemiology, and I also realised while I was doing my master's that I didn't want to be a lab rat. I don't have it in me, I don't have the patience to sustain it, it's just not something that I would enjoy. So when I was looking for PhD positions, I tried my best to look for positions that I knew would kind of facilitate my learning, would give me a really just large scope, for the lack of a better word. It will teach me a lot of things that I hadn't known before. And I also knew that I wanted to get into some form of policy or public health work when I had graduated. I had no desire to become an academic when I had started my PhD. That changed during my PhD, and it has since changed back since I realised that I don't really enjoy teaching or math. So it's important to note that I didn't start with my PhD with the idea that, oh, I'm gonna get my PhD, then I'm gonna do a postdoc, which is what you do after your PhD, then I'm gonna, become an academic and then become a professor. That was not what I had in mind, and I think it's important to note that, in my opinion, you don't have to want to become an academic in order to do a PhD. I decided to do a PhD because I was passionate about research. I enjoy the act of research, and I felt like 3 to 4 years was the perfect amount of time and the perfect opportunity for me to learn as much as possible in an environment that kind of forces you to do it mostly by yourself. And it will give me the opportunity to explore as much as I wanted to explore, take whatever classes I wanted to take along the way, and force the learning myself, which I didn't think that I would be able to get in a working environment. And also, when I looked at the types of people who I aspired to be, the job roles that I aspired to have, a lot of them had PhDs or they had medical degrees, and I wasn't about to go to medical school, y'all. So my options were, and I was also very much in the mindset that if I can do something now, I should do it now and kind of get it out of the way, for the lack of a better term. It's 3 to 4 years of my life. I'd rather do it while I was young and I didn't need such a high income, because you get paid for your PhD but you don't get paid that much. So that is just kind of a brief overview into my point of view, why I decided to do my PhD. And so now I'm going to dive into some of the questions and some of the things that I wish I had known. So the first question I'm going to answer is, how do I think I managed to get my PhD? I think if you'd watched my last video, I mentioned how during my master's year I was applying for a bunch of PhDs because I knew what I wanted to do my PhD in. No, I knew I wanted to do my PhD, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do my PhD in. So I think some of the factors that contributed to me being able to get my place was a good CV. I put in a lot of work the second time round into my CV to kind of tailor it to show my research experiences rather than my work experience. I had a really good course director for my masters who really helped me, really gave me a solid reference, which I really needed at the time. And I also think I interview well. I presented my ideas quite clearly. I was quite honest with what I wanted to do in terms of research, why I was interested in biosocial research, especially because I would be kind of switching fields, what I did know and what I didn't know. And when I went into the interview, I very much came in with facts. I came in with previously read information. I understood how to design a study. I had developed all of these skills that you don't traditionally get taught while learning the biological sciences, and I think that really worked to my advantage. I think ultimately, after getting my place, I feel as though my master's research itself is what prepared me for it. I think there's a difference between actually getting accepted and feeling prepared for the role that you're about to go into. So once I had completed my master's research, which I'm going to be talking about in a different video in a lot more detail, but you can also check out my research abroad video, which I'll tag down below. Once I completed that, I felt like I knew how to do research, and I could finally understand why you do 3 to 4 years of PhD, because when I was applying for PhDs, I had a hard time imagining what you're going to do for those years. I felt, okay, well, I've done a dissertation before, and this was before I started my master's dissertation. I've done a dissertation before, so what's new? What's going to take that long? And I think that's something I wish someone had explained to me before I had started, how much more detail goes into a PhD thesis, and how big the scope is, and how even though you think 3 to 4 years is a long time, it's not a long time at all. There's so much more that goes into it. So that is definitely something I wish I knew beforehand, the amount of detail that's required into it, how you should definitely start writing early, because I'm in my first year and I've started to work on my thesis, and I'm realising now there's little bits and bobs that I should be writing down along the way, not necessarily because it's going to go directly into my thesis, but when I'm writing my thesis, I will appreciate my past self for the reference that I thought would be good for that section, or for the reading that I knew that I should be doing, that sort of thing. Continuing on from that, what are some things that I wish I knew despite all of the information out there? I think as a black woman, I wish I was aware of how, I knew it factually, but I didn't know it personally because I didn't know anyone, or I hadn't really seen anyone doing a PhD, kind of like how white academia gets the higher you go up. I knew it on an intellectual level, but I think on a personal level, in terms of knowing how to adapt to situations, I wasn't quite aware of it. And aside from that, I think another factor that I wish I'd taken into consideration was just how emotionally exhausting it is. I think I'm quite good with doing independent research. I'm quite good with working on my own, and I don't know, maybe it's the pandemic exacerbating these feelings, but you feel like you're putting a lot more of yourself into the research because it's all you do 24/7, versus when you're working your master's dissertation, you've had the whole entire year, most of the year, doing actual classwork and interacting with others before you get into the research. And on top of it, when they mark your masters, you're going to come back with a grade. You either got a pass, a merit, a distinction, whatever percentage, however they mark it, wherever you're based. Versus now, I'm working on my project proposal and I don't get a grade for that, and that's been quite strange for me. So it's trying to meet a level of good writing or acceptable research without having the traditional grade system. So I think that can be quite difficult for people who are transitioning straight from undergrad to masters to PhD. Another question I got asked is that, do I see myself staying in academia? No, I don't. It's not for me, guys. I do think it's important for us to have black academics, people of colour academics, especially within the UK when we're at such low levels. But that is not my burden to bear. I'm just not the one. I can't do it. I wish everyone who hopes to do it the absolute best. Y'all have strength that it's just not for me, you know? Following on from that, seeing as I've decided that I don't want to pursue academia, how do I then get the work experience to work in my relevant fields? So I try to get little pockets of experience, but I'm also really lucky in the sense that before I started my PhD, I have worked quite a lot, and I've worked in quite a bunch of different roles, so I have kind of picked up different experiences. However, for me, it's quite important for me to get out of the PhD office and go more into the office. And something that I want to do and implement into my time once, you know, the pandemic kind of moves on and things resume to our new normal is to volunteer one day a week, preferably within a charity in the office, so that I can get more of that experience, preferably within a policy role. just because I think it's important for me to continue to build my CV along the way, so that once I finish my PhD, it's not as though academia and research is all I have. But I also picked my PhD because we get the opportunity to do 3 months internship, and it's compulsory for everyone within our course. So I do plan to do that internship as well, and that will kind of feed into my ability to gain the research as I go along. And I think it's really important, if you're thinking of leaving academia, to do that. And I know it adds a lot of extra pressure, and it comes into the idea of my next question, which is, how do you have enough time? I think you should just start and see how much time you have, but also be realistic about how much time you're able to manage. I don't work outside of my PhD from Monday to Friday. That may change the further I get into my thesis, but that's a rule that I kind of set for myself. I did the same thing for my master's, because I think it's very easy to get sucked into academia and to get sucked into the idea that this is the only life you have and this is the only thing you can do. And I was very important in not wanting to do that. So I think you should start and see how much time I'm able to fit other stuff into my work, dedicating 1 day a week when I was doing the Brilliant Club every Wednesday for teaching for about like a 6-week period. And that included afterwards having to mark as well. So I think it's knowing what you can manage, but it is also quite program dependent. If you have to spend all of your time in the lab, you obviously don't have that day or days to spend. And because part of my PhD will include lab work, when I'm in the lab, I obviously won't have time for other things, because I'll be trying to complete the lab work. So I think it's about being honest about what your PhD entails and planning and scheduling yourself accordingly, but also remembering to give yourself breaks, because you're normal, you're human, you're not expected to continue on for. And how much independent learning and research is part of your PhD. So for my PhD project, it's fairly independent. You kind of run things yourself, you pick your rotations. Once you pick your PhD thesis, you have to, so you can decide your own topic for yourself, which is quite common in the social sciences and less common in the biological sciences, where you apply directly for a PhD and the thesis is there, the supervisor's there, that sort of thing. For us, you could make up your own PhD project, and in doing that, you then have to look for your own supervisor. So you have to build your supervisory panel, which I also had to do, even though I had an initial supervisor, but I had to build my second and my third supervisor. I had to decide specifically what I wanted to look at for my PhD thesis, but also decide the feasibility. You set your own hours. You can decide not to go into the office for 3 weeks and no one's going to ask where you are. That is very different if you're working in a lab and you have to go check on a new experiment. So I'm talking about PhD thesis where you're primarily like at a desk and doing work. You can decide to work overnight if you have access to the building. No one's going to ask you any questions. You can decide that you're going on a 4-month vacation and then submit your proposal on time. No one's going to ask you any questions. Again, this is very contextual to the type of PhD that I do, but your learning is very independent. The work you do is very independent, so you have to stay on top of yourself. And I think if that's something that you're unable to do, you might find it extremely, extremely difficult. This is a question that I asked myself prior to starting my PhD, and that people have asked me having started my PhD, and that is, how do you make money aside from the stipend that you get? So the first thing I'll say is that I don't believe you should be doing a PhD unless you're getting a fully funded studentship. I think, especially if you're eligible to UK EU rights within the UK, I don't think you should do it. I don't think it's worth the expense. As much as I enjoy research, I wouldn't have done it unless it was fully funded. You get the UK RI bare minimum for most programs unless you're part of the Wellcome Trust or particular like high-ranking institutions who basically just have more money. So I'm of the belief that do the best you can with what you have. So with the studentship that I get paid a decent amount of money, but it's not a lot of money. I could have been working a full-time job and be making significantly more money than I do right now, mostly because I have work experience from just previous things I've done during my undergrad and my master's, and I have a master's degree, and I specifically knew what I wanted to get into. So I think that can sometimes be a deterrent for people when it comes to applying for their PhD, but if you can get it fully funded and you can afford to make less money than you would, then it's probably worth it. In terms of making money alongside it, which I'm all for, if you have time, if you have the resources, you should definitely be doing it. There's usually a bunch of opportunities offered within your university. So a lot of the marking that, well, all of the marking that I did was paid, and that was me sitting on my desk marking people's assignments, and I had the criteria and I had a deadline for it, and it was really, really well organized. Me working for the Brilliant Club, that was also a paid opportunity that I did, which gave me relevant teaching experience but also paid me money along the way. I think it's important that when you're looking at jobs, you should look at feasibly what you can do and what you can't do. Other people who had transitioned from working full-time back into academia maybe went back for 1 day a week once they realised their schedule was more suited towards it. So I think once you know your schedule and you know how organised you can be and how much time you have to give within the first 1 or 2 years, that it's not too much to say that you'll be able to give yourself 1 day a week. That being said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to focus on your PhD and your PhD alone for the 3 to 4 years, bang it out of the way, get it out of the way, and then work straight afterwards. It just kind of depends on your needs and what you require at the time. One more question I want to answer that I think is a really good question is, how does your PhD differ from a job? You will never get as much freedom within a job, as far as I know, that you get within your PhD. The ability to do research as easily as you want to kind of go down a rabbit hole, if I'm being honest. You can start a topic, find something really interesting, jump down the rabbit hole, then come back up and tell your supervisor, and they're going to be like, oh my god, that's fascinating, write a paper on it. You're never really going to get as much free time as you will have during your PhD to do something that you're genuinely fascinated by and to become an expert within your field. Oh my god, I almost said expert. This is how you guys know I'm Nigerian. But that is the key difference I think I would find between doing a job and having your PhD. Very brief introduction into preparing for your PhD, some things that I wish I'd known. I know it's a bit all over the place, but I'm waiting for iftar. Your girl's hungry, she's been fasting. So, you know, just help me, you know, I'm trying my best. So thank you so much for watching my video. I don't know what my next video will be on, but it will be on something because I will record it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for coming back to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel, like, comment down below, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.